Hey, welcome to the Friday Night Drive podcast, the West and South quarterfinal playoff preview. That was a mouthful
That
for
was
some
that was a bit.
unknown reason. I don't know why. Anyway, he's JT Pedelty. I'm Eddie Carifio. Thanks for joining us here, and we should probably jump right into this, JT. We got a lot to go over this week. It's the quarterfinals of the playoffs. We could start up at 5A, work our way on down.
That makes sense to me. Go big and then bring it home.
And I like just saying that because we got to start with, the school that I'm basically here for, and then I could just take a little nap for the rest of the podcast. As usual, they just draw my eyes being open, and I use some AI for the podcast. It's very expensive to make it appear I'm awake. That costs this company a lot of money.
So you're basically saying like any bad predictions after this first game is entirely AI's fault.
And man, in all the previous ones, it was the deep fake.
Smart.
So anyway, we'll start off with St. Francis Sycamore. This one's 1 p.m. Saturday. The official Friday Night Drive pick is for St. Francis. I may disagree with that, as we have established. My track record may not be the greatest, but I really like Sycamore in this one. We can't call them the Spartans because they're both Spartans, but Sycamore has 2 wins under their belt against teams still alive in the quarterfinals in 5A. They haven't beaten Rochelle and Morris on their way to a Interstate 8 title. It's an intriguing matchup because it's the old really good offense versus really good defense, strong versus strong here. St. Francis can put up some points. Sycamore doesn't let a lot of teams score. I think the interesting aspect of this game is Sycamore can force some turnovers, and when you got a team that's going to throw as much as St. Francis does, that certainly opens up the interceptions, of which Sycamore has 13 this year. So I think what St. Francis does plays into all of Sycamore's strengths. So if Sycamore can ball control on offense, which they certainly have tried to this year. They've had some success running the ball, are really good running the last couple games against the CPL teams they beat. I like this game for Sycamore.
I'm with you on this. I don't know. I think, and at this point, I mean, I hope no coaches. I have one later where I kind of disagree with Seuss's pick later, and I hope, and one of the coaches that I get along great with and work with every year, and so I hope no one takes it personal when we're not. At this point, everyone's a really good team, and you're just kind of picking them based off what you've seen and kind of what matchups and head-to-heads and common opponents, and sometimes just kind of the mood of things. This Sycamore team just. It feels like every time they've won a lot of games in close fashion, they found a way to do that. And then here down the stretch, they found a way to just kind of dominate opponents. When it comes to winning football games, there's no way they haven't done it with defense, with offense. What they were able to do against Morris and Rochelle. And I think the Sycamore team is a really tough out. And obviously it's the quarterfinals. But I like their chances in this one, Eddie. I'm with you. I think they're a team that, I would not be a bit surprised to see down at ISU here in a couple of weeks.
I mean, they've definitely got the talent. I think the wrinkle with them getting that far comes with the next game I think we're going to talk about here, and that is Naz is really, really good.
Yeah.
They're go ahead.
Yeah. Nazareth Academy, is 5A's in their half of the bracket. 5A's number. What is Naz?
3 seed, I believe.
Yeah, 3 seed. Yeah, and a lot of that, is built off the schedule they play during the regular season, as we saw last year when they won a state championship after they snuck in at 4-5. Is that right?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, they only have 2 losses this year against Rochelle, and a Rochelle team we mentioned earlier. They only lost to Sycamore, handled Morris handily, a team that's still alive in the playoffs on the other half of the bracket. Naz is going to be a very tough team to beat, but I think Rochelle's proven to be that too. That's going to be just, I think, a fantastic game.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably pick Naz in it, but I'm not going to be surprised if there's an upset. I mean, Rochelle, again, ball control. That's the way to keep these high-powered offenses off the field, and Rochelle certainly controls the ball. They had Grant Gensler run for 138 yards and like 4 touchdowns last week. You pick a guy. Every week they have like 2 guys hit 100 yards. It's just a very good running team, ball control offense. And, I I definitely see. I use this phrase kind of a lot back in week one of the playoffs, but there's a blueprint I think that Rochelle can do to beat this team. And I do think Naz comes out on top just because I think they're so loaded. But I mean, I'm not going to drop my monocle into my bourbon if Rochelle wins. Do a double. I never.
Yeah, and don't dismiss the fact that Rochelle's at home. They have that beautiful complex that they built a handful of years ago. It makes a big difference this time of year, having full stands. I mean, obviously Naz is going to travel as well, their fans, but it makes a difference being at home, having that familiarity. I think, and people have talked about, and Rochelle actually is the higher seed here because they have one loss and Naz has two this season. But I think that's a conversation that I've seen people have increasingly year after year after year as we get deeper in the playoffs is, should the IHSA look at some of these, who gets a home game in the semifinals or the quarterfinals? I don't mind the system as it is. I think sometimes maybe some common sense should be put in, but I mean, this is one where Rochelle should be the home team, and I think it's an advantage for them. I think I'm with you. I think you have to think, boy, Naz has an excellent shot in this one. I like Sycamore in the upset on the top half of this one, and just a heck of a game next week.
Yeah, with the thing about the home games, I mean, obviously I have some thoughts, but do want to point out that the North bracket here in 5A, aside from an 8-9 upset, Westinghouse beat Prosser, I think, and that was the 8-9 matchup in the first round, has been chalk. It's been the higher seed has won every game aside from that one. And that's not something you see, given that the obviously the playoffs are determined by, mathematical strict structure formula, and not, like you said, that common sense or subjective element. What you call common sense, someone else would call lunacy, or certainly in my case. But so really weird to see a bracket go chalk for that long. And of course, the one that didn't go chalk is what resulted in Sycamore playing a road game in the second round. And my first visit to New Rockney Stadium last week, but still chalk in the north half, which decidedly has not happened in the bottom half of the bracket. Professional segue. Thank you very much. Give me an award.
That is a good one. Well, it's tough to get when you have programs like Morris and Joliet Catholic that you're dropping in, you kind of assume the chalk's going to go away. But both programs that play in, brutal conferences and do everything they can to schedule up and play bigger teams, tougher teams, go out of state if they have to, which Morris did this year, and took a loss in Michigan. So yeah, you're not going to see chalk when things like this happen. Morris is a 13 seed, has 4 losses this season. They have to go up to Gately in Chicago and visit top seeded Morgan Park. And then on the other side, we have number 6 seed Joliet Catholic, and they'll be going to Peoria Stadium to play Peoria High, which is a 2-loss team. So yeah, we have, I think, starting with Morris, that this is a challenge, obviously, when you're playing a top seeded team. Morgan Park seems every bit a number 1 seed, everything they've done. They're 10-1 this season. They had a 10-game stretch where they allowed 13 points. It's Chicago Public League teams tend not to do particularly well in the playoffs when they come up with teams from outside the city, or outside the public league, I should say. Well, both. But this one is, I think this is a team that's for real. I think the Mustangs are going to be a real challenge for Morris.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've obviously bet against Morris unsuccessfully a couple times this year, but yeah, no, this definitely looks like a tough matchup. I mean, I could definitely see Morris getting the win here. I mean, it is Morgan Park, by the way, should point out they are the team that eliminated Sycamore last year in the second round of the playoffs at Gately Stadium. And I think it was a 1 p.m. Saturday game. In fact, I think Sandwich had the 4 p.m. game after that. And I got a fun doubleheader. This reminiscing, brought to you by. So, yeah, no, it's going to be a good game. I know that I think it's going to be one of these Byron style games that goes down to the 2-1 conversion at the end sort of thing. I think it's close. I mean, again, gun to my head, I'm picking Morgan Park, but again, this isn't a monocle dropping game. That's my phrase of the week. I'm just seeing if we can catch on.
No, I know. Brady Varner, Morris's quarterback. He has lots of weapons to work with. He's a dynamic playmaker. I think the concern for Morris comes on that defensive side of the ball. They just haven't been the Morris team on defense that you've expected to see. The last 4 weeks they've given up. I added this to our preview. They gave up 42 points to Sycamore, 48 to Byron Center, which is that Michigan opponent I mentioned. 28 to Troy Triad in a playoff win, and then 20 last week to Highland. So on one hand, you can say, well, it's trending downward. But on the other hand, that's giving up a lot of points. And then Morgan Park, conversely, when you look at that matchup, I think they were held to 16 points in their only loss of the season, week 1. Since then, I'll just read this off real quick. This is their points per game scored: 26, 54, 20. Not that impressive on that 54. And here we go: 42, 57, 48, 62, 42, 34, 55. Knocking on the door for 500 points in the season. They're just quarterback Marcus Thaxton. They have a running back, Terrence Gurley, just shredded Metamora last week. And everyone knows Metamora has a fantastic football program. I think that's your matchup where Morris has to play better football than they have. They cannot allow what happened against Sycamore, what happened against Rochelle, what happened up in Michigan. They cannot allow their defense to give up a lot of points because Morris has the weapons to compete in a shootout, but they haven't really won a shootout. They had that loss earlier this year to Peoria High, who we're going to talk about in a second. So I think Morris's path to victory is, keeping this a respectable, normal football score, in the 20s, in the 30s, and not letting it become an up and down the field shootout, because I think that's the type of game that Morgan Park's proven, they can score with the best of them.
Should also point out that Morris is about as healthy as it's been all year going into this one. So that also could make a difference, responsible for, not all of the 42 points or 48 points or whatever they were giving up, but certainly had a hand in some of that. I don't think it changes the outcome of any of those games, but could be a factor in this one for sure. I think it was definitely a factor last week too. So that's also worth pointing out. And as you pointed out, Peoria Joliet Catholic, we're a little bit outside of what we normally do, because you want to talk about this one.
A little bit, just for a quick second. I think it's worth it just because it's a great matchup. We mentioned Peoria High won a shootout. Their coach, Tim Thornton, resigned after 14 years, really just built a Peoria High team that, nobody wanted to play because they just, not only did they win and just turn that program around to have, all kinds of success, but also they're just played football like nobody else. They're so up tempo. They had so many games that finished, 74 to 62, or I'm sure they made all kinds of IHSA scoregamis. They're that type of team again, even though Tim Thornton resigned and took a coaching position in Florida. So I think this is going to be a tough test for Joliet Catholic. I know Steve Soucy's official Friday night drive pick is Joliet Catholic. I think I'd go along with that. But it's going to be, another team, just like we said with Morris, really going to be tested on that defensive side of the football, and on the offensive side to keep up against a team that maybe doesn't put all their focus on defense. For me, following closely, sports in the Morris Joliet area as well. I'm really looking forward to a Joliet Catholic Morris matchup, but they both got the works cut out for them this Saturday to get there.
See, I'm the other way, and that would be a great matchup, by the way. But Peoria Morgan Park would be a game, man. That would be. You want to talk about a scoregami? You're going to have both teams hit 100.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know what? You get, like we said, you get to this point of the year, and there really aren't any bad matchups. I think we got, a couple Cinderellas still kicking around. If someone wanted to sit there and try and tell me that, Morris is a 13 seed, they're a Cinderella, I'm not accepting Morris as a Cinderella in any circumstance or anything. I don't think so. There are a couple kicking around, but in almost all these classes, you're going to be talking about powerhouse against powerhouse matchups in the semifinals, which is what we want.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Morris. Again, we went over how the seeds work. So even though they're a 13 seed, I don't think it's what you traditionally think of as an NCAA 13 seed getting to this point. So getting into the Elite Eight. So we can drop on down to 4A for a minute, and this is a very interesting one that stretches from east to west with Dixon and Coal City.
Yeah, Dixon 10-1, Coal City 9-2. Coal City's 2 losses are to Morris and to a team we already talked about, Morris, and a team we're about to talk about, Wilmington. So obviously those are quality losses. I think Coal City hung with Morris into the second half of their matchup, and I covered their game with Wilmington. It was 21-14. Great football game. Could have gone either way. So no shame in Coal City's 2 losses. They get to be at home because of the system where even though they're the 7 seed and Dixon's the 3, Coal City's played 1 fewer home game. So Dixon has to hit the road and go visit Coal City, which I know there's some people up in the Sauk Valley area that don't quite understand the setup or agree with it. That's where I've heard a lot of chatter is from people in the Dixon area. Why are we going to Coal City? But Coal City has a beautiful facility. So if Dixon hasn't been there, anyone who hasn't been there, they'll be treated well. Parking right there. It's fantastic. But as for the actual football game, this should be another great one. I know our Friday night drive pick is Dixon taking the Dukes, which this would be the first time Dixon's ever made it to the state semifinals. This year is their deepest run since making the 4A quarterfinals in 2017. Dixon, that one loss was to Byron on a 2-point conversion try in the closing seconds or whatever, something like that. So, I mean, Dixon scored over 500 points. We talked about Morgan Park and approaching 500 and read off their ridiculous point totals. Dixon's only been held under 43 times, and those 3 times they scored 35, 28, and 35. So they have a potent offense, a good defense against a Coal City team that is perfectly happy winning a 3-0 football game against you. Coal City, they can score if the opportunity is given there, but they love to take the air out of the ball. They love to put together 15-play, 8-minute drives that end in a touchdown, and you only get the ball twice and a half. And so that's all I like to play. So interesting contrast to styles, and I think just a great football game here. If you made me pick this one, I would be hard-pressed not to take Coal City just based on what I've seen them do this year, but obviously Dixon, fantastic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning a little more toward Dixon, but you don't have to squint really hard to see the Coal City win. First of all, playing at home, which leads right into them being able to enforce their type of game. They obviously, like you said, want to take the air out of the Dixon offense. That's a lot easier to do with your home crowd behind you and everything. So that, you mentioned the home factor for Rochelle. I think for Coal City, it could definitely be an advantage too, because teams have tried to make Dixon play their style of game, and that has not worked this year. Dixon plays their style, and Dixon's going to make you score points to beat them. That sort of game probably doesn't bode well for Coal City, I would imagine. But, if they can get the low scoring thing that no one's been able to do yet, but, that's why it's the quarterfinals and that's why they play the game. So I would lean a little more toward Dixon, but I definitely see the path.
Yeah, and this is as deep as Coal City's been in the playoffs since 2019 was the last time they made the semifinals, or they're trying to get to the semifinals, but this is as deep as they've gone since then. And they haven't been to a state championship game since 2004 when they were the runners up in 4A. So Coal City, powerhouse program, but kind of this is that stage where in recent years they've faltered. I think they have a great team. Landon Benson is one of the best all-around football players I've ever covered in terms of smaller half, 4A to 1A, and I'd put him up there with a lot of those 5A, 6A kids that I've covered in the NIB 12 / NCIC / Interstate 8 / whatever it'll be named in 3 years. I'd put him up there with any of those kids. He's just a fantastic football player at everything he does. He kicks the extra points, he punts, he does everything. So really, really interested to see this matchup. If for me, the key matchup here is can Coal City's defense, which is the way Coal City controls football games with their defense, can their defense slow down, hold Dixon to, 2-3 touchdowns? Dixon's never been held under 28 all year. I think if Dixon reaches 30, Coal City's in trouble. I think Dixon's path to victory is keeping Dixon, 3 touchdowns-ish. Understand they're going to get some, but control it. Don't give them many possessions and grind out a win. I think that's Coal City's path to victory.
Yeah, I know we spent a lot of time on this one. The one thing is if Coal City could end up with a defensive score, that's the sort of game where now obviously Dixon didn't really turn the ball over, but Coal City's defense has got to be up in the top. One of the top defenses Dixon has probably seen this year outside of probably Byron or something. So that's always a big element if their defense can produce that way, which is always asking a lot for a defense. So I think that's good for 4A. We can drop down to 3A. You're going to disagree with me on my 3A assessment. I am now going to go on my long dissertation on 3A. Montini is going to win it all. Okay, I'm done. JT, obviously you might feel a little different about the Montini Princeton game.
You know what? I mean, Montini beating Byron, that, when you beat Byron, and again, another one that came down to the very end of the game, goal line stand. When you have, if you beat Byron, how can you say that you're not the favorite? I think Montini has to be their 9-2 team, the 9 seed. They're going to Princeton, 4 seed, 10-1. Princeton, other than one loss early in the season, has absolutely rolled everybody, been fantastic. Um, I It's tough not to pick Montini in this one, but it's tough to pick against Princeton. One thing with Princeton, they've been in the quarterfinals year after year after year. This is 5 straight postseasons. I can't say 5 straight years because of the whole COVID thing, but 5 straight postseasons they've been to the quarterfinals. They've lost each of the last 3 years at home, um, so including last year to Montini. So this is one where Princeton. This is one they've had. I'm sure they were hoping they'd get another chance, a shot at redemption against Montini here, and here it is. But they've got their work cut out for them.
Speaking of COVID, you need a test? You okay, bud?
Just coming off a cold. No, it's getting playoffs, so I'm getting my NFL Films voice going.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm like I said, Montini. That's Princeton has had, like you said, a heck of a season, but man, Montini, even before the Byron win, definitely, it's fortunate the multiplier hasn't kicked in for them apparently, so they're in 3A, and yeah, so there we go. And again, you people might not like the home game thing. I'd rather have a private school fix, but anyway,
yeah,
that's where we are.
But you know what, the kind of the way I would disagree with you on the state champ. I'm not sure the state champion, and no disrespect to Southern Illinois, because I don't know these teams. We don't see teams, or very rarely do we have teams play against these teams. I think Dixon made a trip down south this year. Ottawa Marquette did, but I know very little about Nashville or Unity or Benton or Monticello, who are all in the bottom half of that bracket. So no disrespect to them when I say this, but I think your state champion comes from the north, and I think just based off what I've seen and kind of scores and whatnot. And I'm not sure it doesn't come from that other quarterfinal, Eddie. You got number 2 seed Wilmington undefeated at 11-0, 3 seed Dupec, Duran Pecatonica 10-1. I've had the pleasure of seeing both these teams here down the stretch this season. They are both outstanding Class 3A football teams. Very different, very polar opposites, but very different football teams. I'm not sure, whether it be Montini or if Princeton pulls off the upset, they're going to have their hands full that next week in the semifinals.
Yeah, it seems to be the theme of the excuse me, the really powerful offense versus the really powerful defense, with Wilmington playing the role of the really powerful defense. Although Dupec's defense, as you could attest as well, I saw them Kingston in the first round of the playoffs, Dupec. But as you could attest well, the Dupec defense also pretty good.
Yeah, so. And the one thing I would say that's interesting, and that Seneca Dupec game in week 9, which Dupec beat Seneca. I think Seneca outscored them 13-0 in the third quarter to take the lead, and then Dupec outscored Seneca 13-0 in the fourth quarter to get the win, or something like that. It might have been 15, but whatever the case is, the one thing that Dupec, they did a good job against Seneca's running game, but they bit hard on fakes, and they over pursued, and they let Seneca's fullback just absolutely gash him for 3 long runs. I think there was a 40-yarder that set up a touchdown. There was maybe like a 70-yarder that was a touchdown, and like another 50-yarder. And I find this Brody Rodemaker, Seneca's fullback, who's fantastic. Not your typical big bruising fullback. He's a bruiser, but he's got some legs on him too. He can go. If that's not something Dupec has cleaned up, Wilmington runs fakes at least as well as Seneca, if not better. Wilmington out of a wing tee, Seneca runs that power tee. I'm very interested to see if Dupec gives up home run plays to Wilmington, how this game plays out, because that's really not what Wilmington likes to do. I mean, you never say no to a touchdown. although more recently as times late in games NFL players have, which drives me crazy.
You never say no to a touchdown. You're good.
But you never say no to a touchdown, especially in high school football. But I think Wilmington would prefer to, as I said with Coal City, I think Wilmington would prefer to take 8 minutes off the clock and score, especially Dupek has Cooper Hoffman, their quarterback, who's just as good a small school football playmaker as I've ever seen.
Hoffman's legit.
Just his ability to throw the deep ball, his ability to scramble. He barely ran at all until they needed it, and then he ran almost every play. Kind of reminded me of a Justin Herbert type that doesn't want to run, but he'll do it if he has to, and is good at it when he does. But what really impressed me more of anything about him is the way he put his receivers in a position, on little out passes, little swings, little screens. Everyone was put right on their hands in stride, leading them away from a defender, just kind of like that next level accuracy that you don't see a lot in high school. And I think if Wilmington is able to get those home run plays on the run game, which isn't really their forte, but if Wilmington is getting those quick scores and giving Hoffman the ball a lot, you're going to see you're going to see a player like Hoffman figure things out and put up some points against Wilmington. So I think this is a great game. Seuss's pick is Wilmington. If you made me pick, this is where I said earlier, I definitely hope Coach Reents doesn't take this the bad way. If you made me pick just based on what I've seen of the two teams, I would take Dupek. I think it's a good football game either way.
Yeah, I haven't seen Wilmington, but it's too hard for me to pick. To me, it's a toss-up game. A couple of things I want to point out. We got to keep this train moving. We still got 2 classes to get through. But 2 things I want to point out is that I think Dupek's issue with Seneca may not have been so much a Dupek issue, but Seneca doing very, very well. As Jonah Kingston also runs the wing T. Now, obviously not to the level apparently of Seneca or presumably Wilmington, but they did, and Dupek had no problem sussing out where the ball was and everything. Misdirection not quite as heavy a part of GK's plan, but it's still obviously there, just that's baked into the wing T. So I think that's, like I said, more of a good thing for Seneca and Wilmington and not so much a ding necessarily on Dupek. The other thing, when you mentioned the south part of the bracket, you want to talk about chalk, this would be decidedly not. You've got a 4, 9, 10, and 6 in there. That tends to, especially given that the 10 seed's still 8 and 3, 6 and 3 regular season. I think now I know as much about Nashville Unity and Monticello as you do, or less, I would assume. But that seems to indicate, maybe there's a lot of parity down there. Maybe there's not a high-level team, just a lot of really good teams. And then you got the iron sharpening iron aspect of it, but you're still talking Montini or a team that beats Montini. So I'm with you on the north half is where the champ's going to come from. We know I'm never wrong. So, which brings us to 2A. Dwight and team. I don't know how much you know about Farmington. I guess you get to enlighten us.
Well, just a little bit about Farmington, just kind of their reputation and what they've done this year. Farmington undefeated, the top seed.
Also, really quick, them being the Farmers is like crazy.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, Coal City
Farmington Farmers.
Yeah, Coal City Coalers, Farmington Farmers. I like when people don't overthink it. I like the clever. I like the clever Polo Marcos, but I also like the Farmington Farmers. I think it's fantastic. But Farmington, they score a ton of points, especially early on in the season. That's kind of tapered off a little bit. A lot of that's been the competition they've played, but it's been weird watching it because if you had one of those charts that has, their scoring goes like this and their points allowed has gone like this, kind of, they seem like one of those teams that just whatever they need to do to win the game, they do. I'd maybe like to use another NFL analogy, like a Kansas City Chiefs where, Patrick Mahomes, isn't good this year statistically or whatever. They're not scoring a lot of points. Well, then they did defense. Well, the defense doesn't have their grades. Well, then they block a field goal. Farmington just seems like one of those teams that, has found a way to win. And, speaking of finding a way to win, Dwight, Steve Susie messaged me after the game and is like, what kind of voodoo are you doing with Dwight when you go cover them? Had it coming off a fantastic game against Elmwood Brimfield, 12-6. They won on there's only 3 completed passes in the entire game, and the winning pass was a touchdown.
Are you on the Dwight bandwagon again this week? Are you at that one?
I am not. I am not. I have Bill Fresco's going there for a Friday night drive, so he'll be there. You can follow him with updates. I might go there just to watch. I do not have a Saturday afternoon game as of right now, so might be there just as a spectator. It's an easy drive for me, and man, that Dwight team's fun to watch. A lot of just a goofy game. Dwight basically gave up 5 yards and got a fourth timeout in the second half. Is what it ended up being, the upshot of it all. The coach just said he thought Elmwood had taken a timeout. So he went out on the field and talked with his kids, and they got to delay a game from the 1 yard line that pushed him back to the 6. But he got to call 2-3 plays while he was huddled up with his kids, and that's the second of those plays ended up being the game winner. So
Greatest penalty of all time.
it was fantastic. I thought for sure it was on purpose. He's like, I'm a young coach, man. Coach Matt Standifer. He's like, I'm pretty young. I'll learn from it. I thought they took a timeout. I was kind of surprised no officials went over. It was like, hey, what are you doing on the field? They didn't take a timeout, but sometimes, everyone's looking around thinking someone else is going to do something and just wondering what's going on. But it all worked out for Dwight. The Cinderella probably that's left in small school. Dwight, number 12 seed. They're 8-3 now. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're 8-3 now. Should be a great game. I think you have to think Farmington undefeated. And the one that really stuck out to me that would make me think Farmington's the favorite in this is, this Elmwood Brimfield team that Dwight Gardner South Wilmington just beat 12-6 on a last minute play. They're in the same conference as Farmington, and Farmington beat them 40-0 in week 5. So if you're doing that common opponents and kind of doing that thing, you have to think Farmington maybe has a little more muscle than Dwight Gardner South Wilmington in this game and runs it off. But you know what? Dwight gets them at home. We talked about that before, and I'm sure they're perfectly happy to be in the quarterfinals for the first time in school history and take their chances.
Yeah, I don't much to add on that one. I mean, Dwight's just playing with house money at this point, so always a dangerous proposition when you got a team with nothing to lose playing at home. But it certainly seems like on paper the farmers that farm in Farmington will probably the favorites. So one more thing I know we want to touch on really quick down in 1A. And that is, pardon me, I could need about 25 minutes to say this name. Gibson City, Melvin, Sibley. They have Lewin. Or they go to Lewin. Lena Winslow in a NUIC HOCI alphabet soup showdown.
There you go. Yep. And that other one that's playing with them in the quarterfinals that would match up with them in the semifinals, number 12 Galena 7-4 and undefeated Leroy 11-0, the top seed. And I only point this out because you pointed out in class 5A the Interstate 8 and the CCL Green.
Yes, which we actually didn't say. It was in my notes but didn't make it on here, but good point. It's the CCL Green I8 showdown and
half of the bracket, and this is a Heart of Central Illinois Super Conference. That's the combination of the Central Illinois and the Heart of Illinois. This year was the first year they got together for football. But yeah, you got your Heart of Central Illinois, and your Northwest Upstate Illini. Both these matchups feature them against each other. And the only reason I mentioned this game, they're both a little outside of what we normally talk about, although our teams rub up against them a lot. Main reason I wanted to bring this one up is I know every year people talk about, especially in the summer leading up, when we're doing our previews for Friday Night Drive, we preview almost every conference in the northern half of the state, talk to the coaches, players to watch. Here's the big games. It's really cool. I'm advertising something that happened in August, which is kind of dumb, but I'm advertising.
I think we're still selling the preview if you want to check it.
Yeah. There's a magazine out.
I think these are still available for purchase, I assume.
Yeah, beautiful magazine. You can look at how wrong we were and how right we were. But one of the things with when we do those, and a lot of people talk about, you should do more with this conference. This is the power. We had 7 playoff teams last year. And I always say to people, you know what, when you're picking out your Thanksgiving turkeys and looking at the date to thaw them, that's when you tell me what conferences are good. This matchup, or like we talked about with the Catholic League Green and Interstate 8, when you get to this weekend and you have matchups like this where the entire half of a bracket is two conferences facing off against each other, that's what I call a good high school football conference. This is, you don't have much better than the NUIC and the HOCI now, not the HOIC. You don't have much better than them in small school football, and this points it out.
Yeah, and I think it speaks really well to the I-8 for, a 6-team conference joining this party. You're talking about, the Catholic League. You're talking about, the NUIC. You're talking about the Hoik or the HOSI or both. And you're throwing in a relatively, let's face it, young conference, even though obviously the name's been around, but you're throwing in a 6-team conference. It speaks really high to what those teams have done, and not just Morris Rochelle and Sycamore, but obviously, Canelan getting into the postseason and LaSalle just missing out.
Well, you've got half of the Interstate 8 still playing.
Yeah.
Okay. So that tells you everything you need to know about that conference. All the times when we've written previews or talked with coaches at Ottawa or LP or Canelan, like, man, this conference slate, Yep. I mean, it's proven out because they're going out and beating the crap out of people from other conferences too. So when you compare, since it's Thanksgiving, cranberries to cranberries, you're finding out which conferences are powerhouses. And no surprise, we talked about all year, the Interstate 8's one of them, the Heart of Central Illinois is one of them, the NUIC is one of them. This is not a surprise to anybody.
I mean, the question is, does Interstate 8 get a team into the next round? At this point, it's 3 pretty tough challenges. Even on a relative scale for this point in the playoffs, it's pretty tough. So
I would say Sycamore has the best chance. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I see the road for all 3 of them getting there, but I really like Sycamore. I think if they force some turnovers, they control the clock, things that they've done all year. Like, even with their quote unquote problems running the ball, and I use the word problems in all the air quotes in the world, even with those problems, they still ran off so many long drives, 12 play, 16 play drives, because they'll use the short passing game effectively too. They can take the top off if they have to, but they can use the short passing game. They have multiple places they can run from, and even those problems, and I'm going full Dr. Evil at this point, is 3 or 4 yards a carry, which they're pretty consistent in at least getting that. So I really like Sycamore's chances in this one. I think they're going to win.
Let's go ahead and seg right into our picks to click, because I believe you have an Interstate 8 standout as your pick to click.
I do. I can just keep talking about Sycamore because I'm in the turnovers, because they have a lot of interceptions. Like I said, 13 this year. Carter York has 5 of them at defensive back. Caden O'Donnell, I think he's been my pick to click prior. He has 3 interception returns for a touchdown, 4 total interceptions, and he's a linebacker. If I'm saying turnovers, I'm going to go with Cooper Bodie on this one. He's another linebacker. He has a pick 6 this year. He's a powerful just linebacker. He can lay hits down. He can force fumbles. I think if he gets a turnover, I think Sycamore wins. So I'm going, and plus he's been playing running back more and more. He's obviously a bruising linebacker. So you can imagine how that translates into the backfield, especially with when they shrink it on down and run the a more heavy set. So I'm going with Cooper Bodie as my click to pick. Yours?
I could flip a coin. Mine's going to be in Class 3A. I could flip a coin here between. I think Wilmington, if they're going to win this game over Dupec, I think it's going to be a great game. And even if I think I would, based on the games I saw, I'd give Dupec a slight edge. I think Wilmington's going to have a very good game, and I'm going to pick running back Kyle Farrell. Could be Farrell. I could also pick Ryan Kettman, who's the other featured back for Wilmington. They're almost the same guy. I think if you had to pick, if you talk to the coach, I think maybe Farrell's a little more physical and a tiny bit less explosive than Kettman, and Kettman's maybe a tiny bit more explosive and a tiny bit less physical, but they're both physical. They're both explosive. They're both great running backs. Picking one of them, I could have flipped a coin. I'm going to take Kyle Farrell today just because I think that physicality is the advantage that Wilmington will have over Dupec up front. And if they're going to win the game, it's going to be because they are just beating up Dupec up front. So my pick to click will be Kyle Farrell, Wildcats running back, in that, which should be an awesome matchup.
Oh, pick Evan Cox, you coward. The Dwight standout for those of you that don't have the Dwight roster offhand, but
yes,
no, I think that'll do it. I think we can call this a podcast. I think we're probably going to call this a season. We'll see how stuff shakes out, but I know we said that after last week, and here we are this week. But definitely, as always, has been a absolute pleasure.
Yep. love talking football with you, Eddie. Always a good time. Hopefully, great to see so many of our teams still alive down here in the, like I've said, we jokingly call this the cornfield podcast. Just because, it's kind of, we're outside the suburb, which is most suburbs, a suburban area, which most of Friday Night Drive centers on. So awesome that we still have so many teams, not only alive, but so many great matchups. And I think we squeeze a few teams into the next round. And, whether we're here to report on them or we hand it off to the mothership Friday Night Drive podcast. Either way, I think we have some great football coming down the stretch.
Okay, well, again, thanks to y'all for listening. And he's JQ Pedelty. I'm Eddie Carifio. See ya.
Take care.